Hi, and welcome back. Today the discussion is on ethical egoism. The idea that to live the best and most worthwhile life, we should pursue our own self-interest exclusively. In other words, the idea is that our only duty is to ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean that we should avoid helping others. Sometimes what is in our best interest might also be in the best interest of someone else. It might coincide with someone else. And it certainly doesn't mean that we are going to actively or purposely do things that might harm other people as well. It's just the idea that to live the best and most worthwhile life, we would put our own interests first. And our only duty is to do what is in our own best interest. Okay, so why might this be valid? Those that are egoists and believe in putting your own self-interest first say, well, the opposite, altruism, which is putting other people's interests first, is self-defeating. So being an egoist would be much preferable than leading an altruistic life, which ends up just defeating yourself in the end. And so one of the arguments that they might say is, well, if you set out to be your brother's keeper, you might not necessarily know what is in their best interest. You might not know what they need or what would be beneficial to them. So you could really bungle up the job. You could mess things up. Or at the very least, it could be seen as an invasion into privacy of others. If you're constantly in someone else's business, are you invading their privacy? Right? Are you treating them like a charity case by having to take care of their wishes and their needs first? Many people might see that as degrading. And so an egoist would say, well, you could avoid that if you just focus on what is in your own self-interest first. And while that might look like an egoist rationale, I'm wondering if it really isn't. Maybe it's not egoist at all. Maybe it's unegoistical because no one really wants to bungle someone else's life up. No one wants to invade privacy. No one wants to intrude or treat people like charity cases. So, maybe it is about thinking about others. So I'm not convinced that is necessarily the best argument, although it is a good argument for being an egoist versus an altruist. There's an author named Ayn Rand who is an egoist, and she really believed that altruism is self-defeating. In fact, she says it's a totally destructive idea. The idea that you're just living your life really to sacrifice your life. If you're constantly thinking about what can you do for others and what can you give to others, then you're just sacrificing and totally denying the value of a human life. And so she feels that that's a totally destructive idea, that you don't necessarily then worry about how to live your life, you worry how to sacrifice your life, right? And since each person only has one life to live, if we truly value the individual, then we have to see it as supreme importance. It's the only one that we're going to get. And so the ethics of altruism, looking out for others and doing what is in others' best interest, is really just regarding life as something to be sacrificed, really not taking the value of life seriously. And so egoism, Ayn Rand would say, really allows each person to view life as the ultimate, as having the ultimate value. And so she believes that egoism is the philosophy that we should accept. Okay, so either you're an egoist or you're an altruist. Do we have to choose? Do we have to have only two choices? Is it possible to have a balance between both, right? Thomas Hobbes, great philosopher, really said that he believed that egoism just really boiled down to one rule, that golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? Maybe. But as we're thinking about egoism and self-interest, egoism would say, that self-interest is the only reason we should engage in behavior. Well, is it possible that while it might be a reason to engage in behavior, that it might not be the only reason, or should be the only reason that we engage in behavior? Maybe it's a reason, but maybe it's a secondary reason, right? If we help the starving children of Africa, and we're thinking of other people, that is a behavior. But maybe we are doing it because we feel better about ourselves. It feels good to be beneficent or to show goodwill to others. That's an egoistical reason for engaging in the behavior. So while it might be a reason, it might not be the only reason to engage in that behavior. So I think that those are worth thinking about. Of course, those that don't like egoism would say, okay, there's flaws in this theory. Is it possible that egoism would endorse wicked actions? Yes, it is possible. If one is only thinking about their own interests, they are only duty is to put their own self-interest first, it is possible that that might endorse wicked actions. And the other idea here is if you really think about what this means, you might come to the conclusion that egoism is, it really can't handle conflicts of interest. It's contradictory, right? It's contradictory because it allows one act, one behavior, one action to be judged as right and wrong at the same time. And how does that happen? How can the same action be both right and wrong? Let me give you an example. Suppose that Jack is competing against Jill for a job, right? And an ethical egoist would say, it is right for Jack to praise Jack's qualities. That is what Jack ought to do. It is what Jack should do. That is the right thing to do. But an egoist would say that it is wrong for Jill to praise Jack's qualities because Jill should be doing what is in her own best interest. So it is right to praise Jack's qualities for Jack, but it is wrong to praise Jack's qualities for Jill. How can the same behavior be both right and wrong? So a lot of people who look at egoism say this is contradictory. This theory can't really handle conflicts of interest all that well. Right? The other main issue with egoism is that some people believe that this is an arbitrary theory. That, in fact, that it's unacceptably arbitrary, I think is what the term that your author used. That the interests of others, according to common sense morality, should matter to us. We should treat people in the same way unless there's a relevant reason not to. But really, ethical egoism divides the world into two categories. It divides the world into me and everyone else. And I think one of the arguments against egoism is that people would say, well, you really have to ask yourself, what is the difference between me and everyone else that justifies putting me in such a special category? Why do I get to be the person that my interests are solely looked at when determining what action is good and what action is bad, or what is morally right and what is morally wrong to do? A lot of times common sense morality would say, no, there really should be some equality there. We shouldn't put people in special positions or special places, of course, unless there's a relevant reason to do so and there's a relevant difference between them. So I think you have some very valid points for egoism and why it might be beneficial to be an egoist. But I also think that there may be some flaws in this theory as well. So once again, as we're trying to figure out how to lead the best and most worthwhile life, you're going to have to balance the pros and the cons, balance the advantages and the disadvantages of each of these theories, including ethical egoism. Okay, until next time.